Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at a brand new Tier 10 premium cruiser, the Pioneer. This is a Commonwealth cruiser with a 12-kilometer radar, as well as high explosive and a crawling smokescreen. What would happen if we gave Brisbane a crawling smokescreen is essentially what Pioneer is. This ship will be available for steel. 31,000 steel is going to be the distribution method here. That sounds pretty busted, right? Brisbane with a smoke generator now? That is crazy. It does have some considerable downsides, namely the firing angles are atrocious here, but the DPM characteristics are pretty much the same. HE DPM 258,462, where Brisbane is just 258,000. So basically Brisbane DPM here. AP is much the same as well, just like 3,000 less AP DPM here compared to Brisbane. That's very, very strong. But these firing angles are horrible. We need this smokescreen. 55-degree forward firing angles and 40-degree rear firing angles. That's worse than something like a GK. And this is still a very vulnerable hull. It's like the British light cruiser hulls, not quite as large a citadel as the Brisbane has, but it is close. It is well above water and spans the entire length of the ship. So very, very scary to use all of this DPM. But we have 3 turrets all up front that can all fire forwards. These are quad turrets, so you get 12 guns completely bow in. So you can play it relatively safe. The other thing I really, really like about this ship, and we're going to probably be talking about game design for quite a bit of this video after I get through this ship's characteristics, but this radar, I really like the design of this radar. Okay, wait, hear me out for a second. I know, stealth radar, it's horrible to fight against. Smoke radar, HE smoke, stealth radar, but this has a consumable prep time, okay? Crucially, this radar is not available to you off the start of the game. You have to wait a base of 4.5 minutes to even start using your first radar. I think that is so cool. Same with the sub-surveillance here. Your smoke is available to you off the start, as is your heal and the damage control. But the radar, you gotta wait 4.5 minutes to even use it. I think this is incredibly good game design. Why do blowouts happen? I guess we're getting into the discussion on game balance right now. Why do blowouts happen, okay? Oftentimes, you lose your destroyer right off the start, you lose your spotting, you lose a lot of map control, cap contest control, the enemy gains that huge advantage, and that's the beginnings of your team losing a blowout. Or the opposite happens, your team collects the enemy destroyer early, and your team starts the blowout process. What if we just didn't have radars for the first 4 minutes of the battle? That is very, very interesting. Early spotting is really painful. It means that destroyers really can't play the game until they know where the radars are early. Sometimes those radars are very stealthy, like Pioneer, it's very stealthy. 12-kilometer radar with getting a sub 10-kilometer detect, tricky to deal with. But if you know you don't have to worry about that radar for the first 4 minutes, that's pretty cool. Plane spotting, of course, too. I'm not going to talk too long about planes, but early plane spotting means that, well, you just have to be very, very cautious early on. Ships are very deadly these days at longer and longer ranges as the power creep continues in this game. And so we find a lot of early games dictate the course of a battle very, very quickly. Blowouts happen quite a lot these days. And I think a primary factor there is just how often and how early we get spotting these days on some very high priority, very battle impact heavy ships like destroyers, like light cruisers, that kind of thing, that just kind of get blown up very early on these days. So really cool. I love this design wargaming. If we could have a radar rework, I'm not saying every radar needs to be like this, but having a long prep time at the start of a battle is very, very interesting. Wouldn't change plane spotting, but it would change the way radars go. But let's get back to this ship. It is still a British light cruiser hull. So we have the built-in acceleration, which is really, really nice. It does mean, though, that we take forever to slow down. If you've been playing Minotaur, if you've been playing Brisbane, you know what I'm talking about. Trying to slow down into these smokes, especially because they're crawling smokes, they don't have the biggest bloom of smoke for you, so sometimes it takes forever to actually get yourself covered by one if you're going full speed and you need to get smoked up. So you have to be a little bit cautious there, but the improved acceleration is really nice for avoiding a lot of incoming damage. I also found myself going with double rudder. The base maneuverability here It's fine. It felt pretty clumsy though, having a 10.5-second rudder though on a light cruiser, which is made of essentially fully a Citadel. So going double rudder got me down closer to a 5-second rudder, and that felt very comfortable. Again, having a 12-kilometer radar means that I can afford to not pick up concealment on this ship, taking double rudder in our upgrade slots, and still have a stealth radar. This is kind of the problem with stealth radars, by the way, with such good detect on some of these light cruisers with such long-range radars. This radar, though, does only last 20 seconds, much like the Brisbane radar, so it's not a super long duration 12-kilometer radar. It's not like it lasts 30 or 40 seconds, anything like that, but it is still extremely powerful. It is a very, very good consumable to have. Alongside this smoke screen, allowing me to set up on a flank where the enemy team is pushing in. Yeah, that's where the damage is, of course, going to be at its best. It's awkward to play this ship, though, without the smoke on open water maps. I think that is going to be the big challenge here, alongside, yeah, your gun range. Maybe you've noticed that already, but on the mini-map there, you can see it. 14.5 kilometers of range on this ship. That's it. You could take range mod, but I prefer reload, okay? I definitely want the extra DPM here. The guns are pretty strong. They allow you to farm a decent amount of damage, and I don't think the extra range is that valuable considering their flight times. They're fine. They're actually a little bit faster, like 0.2 to 3 seconds faster than Brisbane, out to like 15 kilometers, for example. But still, getting out to 17 or so kilometers, 16 to 17 kilometers, it's not really worth it. I would highly suggest taking reload mod, using the smoke screen, as well as most maps have pretty solid island cover on most flanks, allowing you to push up. If you do get caught in open water, yeah, it's going to be a pretty bad time. I also want to point out the turret traverse here. Probably already noticed it, but the turret traverse here is extremely slow, making for a little bit of an awkward experience when we're trying to radar out the destroyers. I just simply was not expecting a Humphreys to be on the one line here. It's like unspotted most of the... I don't know. I was just not expecting it. And there's absolutely no way I was turning my turrets in time to actually fire at him. These are 30-second turret traverse on these 152mm main guns. Some battleships just have better turret traverse than that, or at least equal, with 457s even. Crazy. So very, very slow turret traverse. So it feels like a very powerful ship, very good consumable layout, extreme power level on the radar in particular with smoke, with HE. Decent DPM, you know, it's nothing too special at 258,000 HE DPM. Some ships have a lot higher than that with it still retain radars, like Worcester, for example, but no smoke on that ship. Very powerful in that regard, but it requires you to do a lot of thinking ahead, a lot of planning ahead with where your turret traverse is, as well as where your ship is positioned too. Floating Citadel, very hard to deal with in a lot of these games, especially considering that lack of main gun range. The pre-kited passive games, you might feel like you're locked out of games a lot of the time, which hurts. Here, I do need to mention again, look at our radar consumable right now. We still have to wait 2 minutes to use it. And, well, it would be really helpful in this early destroyer engagement, wouldn't it? I'm so used to having a radar instantly with my radar cruiser. You know, a map like this one allowing me to push up very aggressively, get an early radar on all these destroyers. It's massive for winning a flank for your team. It's huge battle impact. It's very, very powerful. And Pioneer just doesn't have that, even though it has a really good 12-kilometer radar, great detect, the ability to smoke up for maps that don't have this kind of island cover. But that consumable prep time. I love this as a concept. I really do. Saving some of the power of a ship towards the mid game, or at least forcing the power level of the ship to be a little bit lower off the start and then ramp up over time. I think that's really interesting. And maybe if this design concept comes to more ships, or perhaps it nerfs some ships that we already have that are extremely powerful up front, could lead to less blows. I'm not sure. I really do like it. But here we finally get our radar. 4 minutes into the battle. I'm using some captain skills to reduce the consumable cooldown time, which does affect the prep time. So 4 minutes is what I had to wait here. And now we finally get to radar this Z42. I time it poorly though when he's behind the island, and our radar is almost out already. And we fire all of our main guns at him once. And now that we're at a 55-degree angle, I can't fire my rear gun. The turret angles are extremely awkward here. It is a very weird ship to play. When I first started playing this ship, I kind of just decided I didn't like it in my first battle. If I wasn't taking double rudder, I think that also contributed. But no double rudder combined with the very, very poor firing angles felt awful. So please, double rudder made this ship feel a lot more usable because these firing angles are so bad. Slowing down, it does not slow down very quickly here, but I really want to get into my smoke screen. The enemies are pushing up, so we will make use of our smoke here. This is an example of a map where we spawned on the 1, 2, 3 line here. There is just simply no island cover. I tried to go towards the only island cover on this side, but notice how the enemy team is all pushing from their mid spawn over towards us. Yeah, if our smoke runs out, or when it does in a minute 40, yeah, we're going to be caught broadside on to all those guys in the middle, as well as a crossfire from all the enemy team on the 1, 2, 3 lines here. So we're going to have to start thinking about turning away very slowly. If you haven't used these Commonwealth smokes before, crawling smokes, you have to essentially go at a quarter speed. You can go a little faster. Check the speed indicator in the bottom left. That little arrow there just above quarter speed is how quick you can go before you actually start leaving your smoke screen. It's a little bit awkward to use. Radars also getting caught out. If you're in your smoke screen farming happily, well, you're giving a lot of broadside, at least 40 degrees backwards or 55 to sometimes 60 degrees. It felt a little odd. Wasn't quite sure if the third-party websites here of 55 degrees are correct. Sometimes it felt like I had to give 60 degrees of broadside forwards. If you get radared out, you're very, very vulnerable in the smoke screen as well. You got to be very, very careful here. 40 seconds left on our smoke, and that is a full health Georgia. Well within our spotting range. This could go poorly. But that is nearly 10,000 damage HE salvo. And a fire. Wow, the damage output here is surprisingly good. 16 guns feels nice. And the obvious comparison here too should be Plymouth, right? Another steel light cruiser with 16 guns, much the same here, as well as a smoke and a radar combo. Plymouth, though, doesn't quite get stealth radar, as it's only a 9-kilometer radar there, and it is AP only. The AP has much higher DPM, 457,000 AP DPM on Plymouth, where we're only at 381,000 here. But this has HE, and HE gets you a lot of fires. In basically all of my games, I was getting witherers. It is very solid at fire starting. It's got a base of 9% fire chance, but it works out to around 11 fires per minute, which is decent. Upper half, certainly, of tier 10 cruisers. And of course, the ability to smoke up means that you can play a little bit more aggressive positions and more confidently get some of those fires. When your smoke is up, of course. Here now, we're in trouble, as I already mentioned. We got to get out of here. And our drifting ability is decent on this ship, right? With the British light cruisers in particular. They retain so much speed when they're in a turn that they sort of feel like they're drifting around. It makes it tricky to actually get a solid lead on one of these ships, assuming they are a little further away than 10 kilometers from a Georgia, of all things. Yeah, we're going to get smashed. And here is another weakness of Pioneer. Much like all these British light cruisers, it takes a lot of damage when it gets hit, and it's got to go very broadside, more broadside than those British light cruisers, without a super heal. Yes, it is only a standard heal here, so it is not fully just a Brisbane with a smokescreen here now. It is worse than that in a lot of ways. But you can manage those downsides, and having that smokescreen is really nice. There are plenty of times where I'm playing Brisbane, and I just wish I could set up with a smoke, especially on maps and spawns like we had in this game. It's really uncomfortable to play light cruisers on. I mean, we didn't even get Okinawa South spawn. It's maybe the worst possible example. But this map, 1, 2, 3 line, is also not amazing for light cruiser play. Having a smokescreen is really, really nice here. Much like Brisbane, we do not have any sort of improved pen angles, anything like that on the armor piercing. So unlike Plymouth and Minotaur, those ships have the massively improved AP pen angles, as well as having shorter fuses and shorter fuse thresholds. We don't have that here either. But we have HE. All right, HE is just extremely powerful on a lot of these ships. It has 30 millimeters of pen. I was not using IFHE, by the way. I find myself, when I have 30 millimeters of pen on these light cruisers, that I don't need more than that. For most fights, I have 30 mil pen to get through other tier 10 cruisers. Most of them have that 30 millimeters of armor, and even if they don't, they tend to be a little bit on the larger side, and then they have larger superstructures. That's the other element here of battleships have gigantic superstructures a lot of the time, so we just aim for that, and we're not even getting a benefit then out of IFHE. Yeah, sure, it's going to get us up over 32 millimeters of pen, but cutting our fire chance in half feels pretty bad, especially when so much of my damage seemed to come from fires, especially on those battleships. It's also 4 points. That is a lot to actually use IFHE on a ship like this one. Very, very captain skill hungry is Pioneer. We have so many consumables that we want to get back sooner. We want to extend their duration. We want to buff our guns. We want to improve the turret traverse. We want to have good concealment. There's a lot to deal with here. We want extra consumables. So taking 4 points to get IFHE when I could be aiming for superstructures, I think is fine, at least for me. That is kind of how I found it. Finally got across to the other side of this map, and then it's much more comfortable to play, suddenly. As soon as there's islands, suddenly it's very comfortable to play. Should also mention that as a Commonwealth ship, we are very good into submarines. We have sub-surveillance, 8-kilometer sub-surveillance here, as well as having up to 3 of these plane-based ASWs to drop. Very, very, very nice to have that here. The Brisbane also gets these plane-based ASWs, but it only gets 2 of them and an 8-kilometer range. We get 11 kilometers of range here on these, as well as that submarine surveillance 8 kilometers, which the Brisbane simply does not have. Plymouth, by the way, only has ship-based ASWs. That's the other one we're comparing to. Most light cruisers, destroyers having ship-based ASWs, you're basically helpless against submarines. There's nothing you can do. So having these plane-based ASWs, let alone having 3 of them with really good range and the submarine surveillance consumable, it's really nice to have. Wargaming, please add more submarine surveillance. It's actually some sort of counterplay against that class. It's very, very, very useful. Maybe you could add it to more ships and just give us this consumable prep time at the start if you're worried about subs dying instantly. I would argue, though, that submarines have to worry about way less than a destroyer does. Think about how many radars there are in the game right now that DDs have to worry about, where subs can just dip underwater instantly and not have to worry about it. The range difference too, 8-kilometer, 7-kilometer sub-surveillance versus 12-kilometer normal radars. I don't know. I'm not going to get into a rant about carriers and subs, but I think there is something interesting here when it comes to consumable prep times and Wargaming giving us more tools to deal with some of these problem classes in the mid to late game. As well as maybe help some of those destroyers survive the early game too. I love this concept of consumable prep time. Waiting a little while to actually get some of these extremely powerful radars online is really, really cool. This ship, though, is certainly not easy to play. Okay, we got some good damage games, but playing a light cruiser with such an exposed citadel, with such horrible firing angles, with a smoke screen that's very valuable, yes, but it has a long reload time. This is the real problem or key to understanding the Commonwealth smokes here, is that, yeah, you get a crawling smoke. You can move around a little bit with it. It's very nice, but you have to wait that whole cooldown time. When you're playing a ship with a normal smoke screen, I mean, Inchin is right here, you can just pop your smoke, 30 seconds of action time, but that cooldown time of 110 seconds, remember that we have that 70 seconds of smokescreen dispersion time where we're sitting in our smoke for 70 seconds, completely covered, and that cooldown time is ticking that whole duration. So we really only have like 40 seconds to wait before we can get back to our next smoke. Where with a Commonwealth smoke, we do have to wait that full 114 seconds because it's only going on cooldown when the consumable action time stops. That's the problem here. It's good to be able to move around a little bit, but it's bad in that regard, unfortunately. So you have to be a little bit careful of that. So you're spending more time compared to some other ships, like cruisers with normal smoke screens. You're spending more time between smokes, and that can get you killed. That is a problem. It's not an easy one to play, I don't think. Here is the armor layout. Don't worry, that is not Citadel. And we do have 30 millimeters of deck armor, which is of some benefit, I guess. A lot of 30 mil overmatch at tier 10 these days. I think it's safe to say that. Here, though, is our Citadel. Above water, no bump in the middle here like we would see on the Brisbane or the Minotaur, for example. So that is nice, but it is certainly above water, and it does extend the whole length of the ship. In fact, it even goes a little in front of the front guns and the rear gun here. That rear gun, by the way, was 360 degrees, which is nice for when you're playing more bow in. But I mean, the firing angle at like 55 to 60 degree firing angles, that's painful. But you can at least get 3/4 of your firepower directly bowing, which is still pretty good. It does feel quite awkward to play though a lot of the time. Here is the build that I was running on it towards the end of my play session. I did try to greed out some full lighthouse builds, going heavy HE and sap shells, even trying something like outnumbered for a bit. But I still wanted some concealment, and this actually notably makes our concealment worse. So while taking rudder mod here, double rudder here, which I would highly recommend, that gives us this steering time, rudder shift time of 5 seconds. That feels much better, especially with these firing angles on this ship. If we take heavy HE and sap and still take concealment, notably we get worse than 12-kilometer detect, which suddenly becomes a problem when we're relying on that 12-kilometer radar to spot anything when we get spotted. So really, really powerful to have this stealth radar mechanic, and we don't really want to give that one up. We do want the extra consumables here. It does take a while to get through these consumables because of the prep time on the radar and sub-surveillance, but also the smoke takes a while to cool down, as already mentioned, and these heals are just standard heals, so it can take us a while. You can just blow up very easily in a ship like this one before you even get there. I did want the extra duration. I certainly want the consumable reload reduction here. You basically need to take grease the gears. They still feel very slow. 30-second turret traverse while taking reload mod. And then I took last stand as just kind of an extra skill here. I didn't find myself swapping to the AP that often, and not that I lost my rudder or engine really that much, but just threw the extra point in there. I did not talk at all about the torpedoes. I wonder why. Well, 6-kilometer torps, the damage is decent, the speed is okay, but you're probably not going to be making use of these really all that often. Your smoke fire is 6.2, so it's nice to have if you're getting rushed around a corner or rushed in your smoke. It is really, really nice to have. I would much rather have these torps than not. But if you're playing Pioneer well or in good positions, probably you're not getting much value out of those torpedoes. It's nice on maps that allow you to do some island pushing, that kind of thing. Or again, like I said, if you do get overwhelmed, that kind of thing, it's really valuable to have those torpedoes. But for the most part, I'm not getting too much use of them. The guns here are quite solid. The consumable layout is crazy powerful with some big downsides, notably that firing angles of the main guns, massive citadel, and long durations between your smokes and that prep time on the radar, which I think is really interesting. But notably, it is a weakness of this ship. Other ships just simply don't have to deal with that. I think it's good game design though, but let me know what you think in the comments down below about Pioneer. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.